beautiful, beautiful Saba.
On Christmas Eve of 1970, the lights came on and stayed on for Saba. In commemoration of this historic occasion, Saba Electric Company has made this short film. Snapshots and stories from the pioneers who lived through the days before 24-hour electricity, and those who witnessed the progression of electricity distribution on the island. From the former Saba Electric Company to NVGEBE, and in the last decade back to the original name of Saba Electric. We are proud of our progress together with those that made it possible. We start our journey into the past by visiting Mr. Will Johnson, who served Saba in many capacities, such as Acting Lieutenant Governor, Senator, Commissioner, and member of the Island Council for a total of 35 years. So 50 years is actually a short period of time for a little island in the Caribbean to have electricity. Can you share with us how this was able to be possible?
You have to look at the vision first. And the vision belonged to Elmer Linzey and his aunt, Mrs. Martha Edwards. I remember when the Queen was coming here, when Princess Beatrix became Queen, and in 1980 she was making her first official visit as Queen. So it was 2 days before she arrived. They said, you know, the people that organize the Queen's visit, they do all the things ahead of time. They said they have called and said, you know, she cannot open the hospital unless it has a name. So we met at Eugenia Johnson's house. Edwina was one of the committee members, so I told her, don't tell Elmer, it will be a surprise for him. So I proposed, I said, look, on my watch, I want things named after Saba people. And if you check my record, everything that came after that was named after Saba people. She was not in the medical field, but we don't know if there will be another opportunity to honor her. She lost her life in a plane coming to Saba and all that. And so we had it ready for when the Queen came. But Elmer, she and Elmer had the vision to make a light plant on Saba. I live with Elmer better than my brothers, because sometimes among family I have more misunderstandings than with a good friend. Elmer and myself live like brothers, and he told me many stories about this and that and the other. And I remember once he told me this. He said, Will, can you imagine a young black man going around back in the 60s or the 50s asking white merchants to contribute, I'm going to start an electric company? And he said, surprisingly, people like Edwin Johnson and all of them bought shares of the company. They said, man, that's a good idea. And he started out, the Saba Electric Company was privately owned by him and his aunt. But they sold shares of the company because Claude Watty himself told me that when he sold it to GB, he said that remind Elmer that I got 200 guilders in the company. So Elmer negotiated that he remain on as manager and that they do this and do that for the company. And he, at one time, Rufus stayed there until he went on pension, but his brother Donald also worked at a company for a while, and then he went to New York. But the first engine that came to Saba, people always ask me, all those years that you landed vehicles on Saba in that way with the two boats strapped together, did any ever fall overboard? I said, no, not the motor vehicles, but the first engine that came here fell in the sea. But the Saba people, you know how you have strapped it with ropes and chains and everything, pulled it up, and they cleaned it up, put it to work. I think it might be still running for all I know.
Can you talk a little bit about how it was before the 24-hour electricity? So the electricity was turned off at a certain time, or?
Correct. Well, I lived on St. Martin during that period, but I would come here for weekends at times and so. And the biggest complaint was when 10 o'clock came and the lights went out, they would flicker the light first. I think later on it became 11. And you didn't have it at the beginning, like it was only like 3 times a week or something during the day, so people could start using electric iron and stuff like that. So, and then Elmer, so it was inconvenient in 1 week. You're out to a party, lights gone off at 10 o'clock. Only then you're in the mood to party. But it gradually went in the direction, because in the meantime, they had to put all these poles in place. A lot of infrastructure had to go in. You had to get an extra engine, you know.
Did that mean that everyone had electricity, or only certain people, certain homes?
Well, they tried to hook up as many people as possible. And I doubt very much there was much of a hookup charge. But Roy Smith, he worked from, very beginning along with Elmer. And he would remember, of course, Rufus. I mean, Rufus was the treasurer of the company. Rufus would remember as well, you know.
When did the electricity supply start on Saba? Not the 24-hour electricity, but more or less?
In the 60s, right now. I don't have the exact date, but it was in the 60s, early 60s. Because Elmer had already set up the company from the late 1950s and was already working on it. But when I was a boy, there by the governor's house and by the little hospital that was there at the bottom here on Windward side, that wasn't too far away from the Saba Electric Company. They would have a few generators, but not many. I doubt if there were 5 on the island. So first thing in the afternoon, you would have to get your kerosene light sitting ready. The water, if you had a tank on the roof, you pump up the water. Otherwise, you dig it up out of haul it up in a bucket from your cistern and stuff like that. So, and but they used to have, like, for instance, Austin Johnson, I remember, had one. He had a windmill. At a certain point, old Mr. Helliger from St. Kitts, who had a jewelry store, he also sold Grundig radios. And my brother Eric was in St. Kitts and he bought one. Then everybody had to have it was something new. You would listen to a radio station from Trinidad, from St. Thomas. There weren't many radio stations then, you know. And but you required a battery, and Austin would charge the battery for you. When you went to somebody's house, the Grundig radio was sitting there in the living room and the battery was under the table, you know. But because after Eric got it, then Mr. Helliger asked him to be his agent on Saba to sell the Grundig radios, you know. And I don't know, maybe your grandfather, but somebody at the bottom had one windmill too. I know hence in Windward Austin had that. And he charged you a couple of guilders to charge your battery, you know. And the charge would last for a while because it was only the radio, I don't think, pulled that amount of energy, you know. But that I would say was the first use on a large scale of energy that way, because I think they must have had at least 100 of those radios on the island, you know. So you had to have a battery with it, and that was back in the 50s coming up. I remember that radio station in Trinidad was very popular, and the one in St. Thomas, because people would send requests to them, and it was a big thing when they would call. My cousin Estelle, they had called her name once on the St. Thomas radio, and she was so thrilled with that her name had been on the radio. Yeah. And when the radio station started in St. Martin, I took off from Sydney last week to give out the local news. I used to walk from town down to the fort, and then twice a week and give out the news. But the first time I gave out the news, Mr. Carl Hassel, they called him Sheddy. They were swinging doors just now. He had a grocery store and a rum shop, everything mixed up together. So the night when I gave the first newscast, I learned afterwards that Mr. Carl, he was known for holding on to his money, had given a treat to everybody there. He said, that boy has done a good job. So yeah, that even the station in St. Martin only came in the 60s, you know.
Thank you, Will, for this timeline of history and electricity.
Next stop was by my grandmother, Miss Carmen Simmons, a lifelong advocate for youth and age welfare on Saba, as well as being the curator of her very own museum.
So, Miss Carmen, it's nice of you to accept this invitation to tell us a little bit about electricity, your earlier years growing up without electricity and seeing the transition from then to now.
First, I would say we had no lights. It was dark, but you enjoyed it. I don't know the reason why, but you enjoyed it. You know, when you had to go anywhere, you would make sure the plan that it was a moonlight night.
Okay.
It was a moonlight night, and you would go to the bay for a picnic. You know, you go on one side, you cook pots. You know, so it was nice.
Yeah.
You was happy, but you always wait for the moonlight, more or less. Christmas was always dark, but you know you couldn't see where you was going, and it was the joy, you know, feeling onto the wall to get where you was going, because there was no flashlights, and most people used we call it a jug.
Okay.
A jug about it's called Holland, a kind of brown bottle, and you put cooler bag in it with kerosene oil, and you light it so to make a flame, and then you could see where you was going.
Okay.
So mostly everybody used that to go. And I can remember the night when they had church, or Christmas night and so Old Year's night, they would put them, then bring them and put them in the outer and put them in the window. When they going back, they would light them back again. So somehow or the other, it was like a jolly time. Christmas was something special, you know, and going picnicking in the night. And then some people go crabbing, you catch crabs, you know, with your jug in the night when it was dark, and then you would have a special night, you would cook them. When the government used to have lamps, we call them kerosene lamps, like a lantern. It's more like a lantern. Now the first was the lanterns, and I can remember an old man coming, and he would have them all ready. Every evening, the policemen used to prepare them, clean them, fix them up, and then the man used to go by the police station and pick them up and carry them around, put them up every evening. And every house then, at that time, who could afford it, used to have that lantern too in their house.
Oh, so it wasn't everyone that had a lantern?
No, everyone, some people had lanterns, but everybody didn't have them gasoline lights.
Okay.
Who can afford it?
Yeah.
And they always had a nice design in the roof, and they would hang it up in the roof. And I can remember in the church, the policemen also would help, and the nuns with that same thing, to get it lighted up and thing, and then they would put it in the church, hang it all in the church so you could see. And I remember when the priest came here, and he didn't like the idea. He said it was so much of work to get them things every time cleaned and pumped and ready. And he decided that he would get a Delco. They would call it a Delco in them days. Then all the government buildings, they had a line run from here, his room, straight to the police station. So all those government buildings on that line could get electricity. And the church got electricity. And I can remember the first time I saw electricity was in the Catholic Church. And then Elmer Linzey, as a friend at that time, he said he had planned, Elmer, he would like to start on Saba electricity. So then my brother Martin was a wonderful idea if you can get through with it. And then he said, if you come down Aruba, the Aruba company might have motors that he could help you out with. And they explain you and tell you all about it and give you ideas how to do it. So then he came down. Elmer came down from America. He came to Aruba. And as far as I can remember living with my brother Max. And then he carried him by I forget the name of the Aruba electricity, I forget. I had no chance. Up to now, I deal with them still. Okay. But then they were very good, and they liked the idea, and they were there to help. So I don't know how but he helped, and Elmer Linzey was able to get the motors from Aruba, as far as I know. Okay. And they came. I never forget when they came, and then they came, and then they had posters. I don't know where the posters come from, but he had supposed to have some kind of special hardwood post, maybe for electricity, purposes, for fires and so. So some posters he had, and he had a lot of them come, and he was putting up so many, meters apart. I can remember he was measuring, put them up, and then afterward, then I remember buying the meter box and all that, Yeah. Up and I have the meter box.
The original
one still.
Yeah.
My first one I had. And I can remember then when he come here, then he said that it was needed money. And that everybody who wanted to be a shareholder in it, they could help, because Adela was really doing her best with her money, It was her money she started with. And everybody was happy about it. And everybody, a lot of people, a lot of shareholders, because we had a couple of shares in it, Okay. Yeah, we had a couple of shares, and other people too. So, anyhow, when he had enough money, that he was able to start. I never forget. I don't remember the day, but I can remember that he had all the wires up, and he was going to start. Something, he had to splice something. I never forget how to splice it. And my brother Max always put the foot with Elmer, because he was good on the electrician business. All about with him helping him to get through. And the day when he first set up the light, the first time he want to put it on, my brother cut his nose. I never forget. He died with a mark on his nose. He was kind of nervous, and tried to help out, because that's why it'd be a failure, because he had planned to open up that night. Yeah. And he done so with a knife, and it hit him right in the well, not a big thing, a little small thing. I know, and up to now, he passed away with that mark. No. So we used to always say, he was going with your nose, my dear boy.
So when power came on, did things change?
That it was very enjoyable time. With the lights, because then you could get all kind of things. You had light. You would go on 6 o'clock. Yeah. And it wasn't in the daytime. It would go on 6 o'clock till 10 at night. So everybody would wash in the night. You would iron in the night, and you do anything you had to do was in the night. Yeah. Because in the day it was off. And I can remember that afterward, I don't know when and how and why, but then the government was sort of a good idea and saw us struggling. So they must offer, they offered and they asked them to help. Okay. And I could remember when the government gave the okay that they would, I think, take it over or they would help or something, then the word came out, you get a letter that all the shareholders would be paid out.
Okay. Yeah.
I could remember all the shareholders had to get your receipt where you paid and you send it in and you was paid. Okay. So then the government took it over and the government, but they always kept the two brothers as the head of Rufus and Elmer, as the head of it, you know. And then they had other people working with them. Okay. But to tell you the truth, who were the first people that helped them, I don't remember so good. But I know that Roy Smith was one was always there with them from the beginning. And no heat. But tell you that Other people, I don't remember so good, but
What kind of appliances did everyone buy back in those days?
the first thing was, people was radios.
Yeah.
The first started with radios, and then television was not in the beginning. Everybody had a radio, and then they had electric gramophones too.
Oh, okay.
Work with electric, and they had then television, and they had washing machines. But a lot of people had electric washing machines
Yeah.
and heaters. You iron your clothes. In the olden days, we wash on a scrubbing board and a tub, they call it.
Yeah.
That was you wash, and it was labor, scrubbing. Sometimes you'd put the clothes out outside in the sun to draw them white and all that.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen, for your insight. It was very much appreciated, and we see that electricity has paved the way for a lot of changes.
And last, but certainly not least, one of Saba electrical pioneers, Mr. Roy Smith, paid us a visit.
Mr. Smith, thanks for your visit. We had several interviews before about the evolution of electricity on Saba, and your name came up quite a bit. So could you tell us a little bit about your history with Saba Electric, the startup, and so on, and what you can remember?
Yes, I can, and I must say I'm immensely proud to be able to do this. And it brings back quite a bit of memories with the one who really started this. That was Elmer, together with his aunt Atella. They came up with the idea. When Elmer came to Curacao at that time to really consult with the federal government pertaining to getting electricity here on the island, I was going to school then. And at that time, I was in school and I was studying also in the field of electricity. So when he told me that he was about to, this dream that he had, that he wanted it to be realized in its actual form, well, I told him up front to say, well, make sure that when I'm finished and I come back to the island that you could give me a job. So coming home, that's how I got in contact with Elmer, and we spoke. Well, he wasn't quite ready then to hire people because of, the financial constraints. But anyhow, he made promises, and I used to work from time to time with him. When he needed, he called, and I would come, and we would do different tasks. But then also I had a job working with the government. So in the evening, I used to mainly, after work, I used to work with them doing different things and so forth. After some time, I really got hired by the company, and I started to work in the power plant that was at Crispine. That was when already we had electricity. Then we had established that, and after, it was quite a task to bring it to what it was then. And I must say that when I was working also, I had the opportunity to work with in the capacity of driving up those poles from the Fort Bay. And you can imagine bringing up one pole at a time on a little four-wheel drive Willys Jeep. And we used to have one pole, on it, bringing it up to the bottom and dropping them off wherever needed be. And the joke with that was when we got around the S, you got a long pole sticking out and in the front, also in the back. And to get around the corner, that was a sort of a maneuvering. And you had to be pretty good, because you didn't want to hit a pole in the wall because you could have shaken up the nuts of the rope that had it tied down, and, you wouldn't want to have that falling off the Jeep, and then you have to stop and put it back on. But that was an experience in itself. Was an experience in itself, and that was a very, very laborious job. The poles that came on came with the, a lot of them came with a then boat they had that used to bring the cargo here, steamship. That was the Antilia. And I think they also had another one by the name of the Hatta.
And where did these poles come from?
At that time, we got a lot of poles that we got a donation from Aruba. Aruba gave a donation of poles, but other poles that we had, those were purchased by Alma's, by the company, and you know, those were a more cleaner and a more professional shaved off pole. But those from Aruba, they were so bulky that they had a special tool. You used to bring them, get them down to size. I don't recall who used to do that, but I know they had some of the boys who was pretty good at that, and they brought the pole down to a certain round size that it was easy for you to work with. But lo and behold, those poles could cause a lot of accidents because they had splinters on them. And if you weren't careful when you were climbing the pole, you could get a splinter in your hand or leg, you know. Because those days we had a ladder, yes, but most of the movement used to go up and down the pole was with climbers that we had strapped around our feet that we go up and down with, and you could do it, you know, at your own pace. And no, it wasn't easy.
Did you have to do a special training to learn to climb the poles, or it was just something
No,
natural?
I didn't do much training. I caught on pretty quick. I think I maybe have, you know, slid down, you know, more than once, but you would if you don't hook it in properly, because it has to come from the top and by your heel, and you had to have it hooked in properly. Otherwise, you could find yourself sliding down the pole, and then, you know, you would try to grab. Even at those days, everything was so difficult. If you had a pair of gloves on, that was a luxury. You know, that it isn't like now today that you can get material just like that. Tools, you know, we had to improvise with tools. You had to save the tools, you know, what you had to be so protected with them that you can have them to work another day. Those were the hardships that we faced in those days. But it was a task that everybody worked together. We really worked together. And we had some experts in the gang who could really dig holes to plant the poles. They are not with us today anymore. They have died and gone on. But they could really dig some holes, huh? And that wasn't with machine. That was with the bare hand, with a long piece of iron that was a crowbar or something like that. And, you know, you couldn't, at times it was so difficult that, you know, maybe you would have to shift where you were and come close enough to with another hole, because the rocks being there made it very, very difficult to get a hole.
What was considered when placing the poles?
The reason that you see those poles, all the poles were placed in the high hills, and that was for the main reason that Elmer had, that he wanted to protect the environment, you know. So we didn't plant, those days we didn't plant any poles at all in the road. If that could have been avoided, it was avoided. But all the poles from the bottom, leaving the bottom, going up to St. John's, Windward side, everything was in the high mountains. And you can imagine, to get a pole up there. That was a laborious task, but the people who we had working with us, they were willing. I've seen at times that we were taking a pole up in the hill, and we used just manually with block and tackle rope, and the rope bust, the rope just break, and the whole thing came apart, and the pole came right back down fortunately in the road, because we were going to more or less like going to go to Windward side. And that was again that you had to get rope, and how you got rope. Those days we even had people in the gang that they could splice the rope back together. There wasn't to say that we could go in a hardware store and buy a roll of rope or so many feet. It was very scarce to get rope in that context. We used to get a lot of material from St. Martin at that time. And planting the poles in those hills, you get a pole up, you had to put it in, you plant it, and then you had to dress the poles as we call it. We used a cross arm that would come to the top of the pole, and of course it had its braces on it, and then you would have your insulators that you would have to stick in on that cross arm, and that was the way that you could run the high tension wires on. That was the way how you did it those days. But now there's no comparison how it was then to now. If you to really tell people, how we got poles up there in those hills was really, really something else. Huh? No, it was very, very strenuous work. But as I repeat again, that the people who are working for the electric company, they felt that the company was their own. That was their company. And we all wanted to, do our best so that we could get electricity to the entire island.
How many years did you work with Saba Electric?
I worked about in its entirety about 28 years. 28 years. Yeah.
And Elmer, as a pioneer, what would he think of the developments in electricity today on Saba? We have solar parks. What do you think he would think of all of that?
Well, Elmer was always, an innovator, and he would feel very comfortable with the strides that we have made over the years pertaining to electricity, because he was always looking for ways to better the situation. But at that time, we didn't have that opportunity. But I can say for sure that he would stand amazed to see what we have done since then, when he started, to know that we have solar parks on the island. No, he would be amazed at the stride, and I know he would have been up front doing his best to help her get his way also.
Mr. Smith, thanks for your involvement in the history of electricity on Saba, and thanks for stopping by.
It's impressive how the dreams and efforts of a few have improved the lives of generations of Sabans. With that in mind, Saba Electric is honored to continue their progress, innovating and overcoming adversity as we look to the future. The Saba Electric Company came to a major crossroads around the time of 10-10-10 as part of the then company GEBE. With the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles and the separation of St. Martin, Saba, and Statia as territories, the government of St. Martin initiated the breakup of GEBE, which therefore led to the transition to the Saba Electric Company as we know today. During this period, which lasted about 3.5 years and concluded on December 13, 2013, Chris Johnson was Commissioner of Energy for Saba and led the negotiations on behalf of the island and the company. It was at this stage that cooperation agreements were also made with the Netherlands to ensure support for the tariff structure, the building of the new power plant, the purchase of the more fuel-efficient ABC generators, and the investments for solar energy. In addition, Commissioner Johnson committed the 11 EDF of EU funds towards the solar park construction, along with arranging a $6.2 million payout from GEBE for Saba Electric, and a transfer of all assets and personnel. During this transition period, the original name of Saba Electric Company was restored and the logo of the company established to all help form what today we all know as Saba Electric Company. This year, as part of our Green Initiative, we partnered with US-based Caldwell Incorporated to remove a large amount of debris from our landfill. 160,000 pounds of recyclables were gathered, sorted, transported, and shipped off the island to the US. As windmills on Saba once powered batteries for radios, we too are now looking into the viability of wind-generated power, showing us that we can always look back to the island's past to give us clues on how to move forward to our future.
You'll find rest, you'll find peace on Saba. Come back to